So according to the Real Clear Politics average, Joe Biden is currently up by 4.6 points in Wisconsin with 49.3% of support in that state compared to President Trump's 44.7%.
But the polls used in an average have a wide range, with some new polling and research samples showing a tie in Wisconsin and Reuters Ipsos actually showing Biden up 8 points in the state at 51%. So who the hell knows? Author, journalist, and national affairs correspondent for The Nation, John Nichols. He joins us now to weigh in on the race in Wisconsin from the ground on Wisconsin. John, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us again.
It's a great honor to be with both of you.
Absolutely. So, John, can you outline what are the dynamics of the race in Wisconsin which Washington is missing? What are the most important and salient issues on the ground there right now?
Well, Washington always misses everything about Wisconsin. And the one dynamic of Wisconsin that people have to understand is that this is an evenly split state. It has been for a very, very long time. And so its deep pattern is to have very, very close presidential results. It may be thrown off in the circumstance of a Barack Obama who, really just does incredibly well. But if you go back to 2000, you will see that the 2000 race, the 2004 race, the 2016 race, all decided by under 25,000 votes. And so it's always going to be a close, hard fight. And the reason for that is that Wisconsin is not, a lot of people historically thought of it as kind of a liberal state. It was never a liberal state. Wisconsin has always been a progressive populist state, and it does respond to economic messages. And so that's a dynamic that I still think the Democrats struggle with. But the final element I'll throw on is that I don't think that people outside Wisconsin begin to understand how serious COVID-19 is as an issue here. Mm-hmm. It's the lead story on every newscast every night because there is just an incredible surge going on. And it's just a very serious issue from a health standpoint and, frankly, from an economic standpoint.
One of the things that you were mentioning to us before the segment is that there's been a little bit of erosion for President Trump in rural areas. Obviously, if he's going to pull off a win in a place like Wisconsin again, he's got to not only win rural areas, he's got to win them big, he's got to drive up turnout. What do the numbers look like, and what do you attribute that erosion to?
Sure. That is a huge part of the story. Look, the key for Democrats when they seek to win Wisconsin is to run big numbers in Milwaukee and in Madison. Those are two very, very strong Democratic communities, and a couple other places around the state. But they have to hold a good baseline in rural Wisconsin. That's always been vital, and it's always been possible. But in 2016, Donald Trump really ate into rural. Hillary Clinton's was only getting about a third of the vote, and I'll emphasize that, only about a third of the vote in rural Wisconsin, whereas Obama had been, up into the mid-40s, close to 50%. And so Clinton just collapsed there. In part, it was because she didn't run a campaign that was really seriously aimed at rural Wisconsin. She didn't even come to Wisconsin. The Biden camp has done a better job, but frankly, it's not really about Biden. I would argue that Donald Trump's incredibly cavalier approach to trade policy, his trade wars with China, really shook farm and rural communities. In addition, COVID has hurt rural communities much more than I think national media has understood. Remember, rural communities rely on hospitals. They rely on a healthcare system that needs a lot of federal money. And frankly, as the Senate has not acted on this relief bill that's currently in play, that has really had an impact. It's something I hear people talking about it day to day, watching relief bills because they run a local hospital or they run a local government or a local school in a rural area, and it's not working. The last thing I'll tell you is this. There's a young generation of candidates running down ballot. And remember, down ballot can strengthen up ballot. People often look at presidential races from the top down, but a strong ticket is very vital. And there are people running like Chris Marion down in southwest Wisconsin for the state Senate, Ed Volk up in northeast Wisconsin for the state Senate, a whole bunch of legislative candidates who really are progressive, activist, young candidates who are making a big impact.
Interesting.
So, John, one thing I'm curious about, too, is an underreported area of the Wisconsin story last time around was actually urban turnout. So how is that working out, right? I mean, what do the turnout numbers look like in cities like Milwaukee and elsewhere where underreported or basically underperformance in many ways cost Hillary Clinton the election?
Sure. I mean, you're getting into the heart of the matter. In Wisconsin, when there are 23,000 votes separating from Clinton, you can find 10 hearts of the matter, right? There's all sorts of things we can point to. But you're right that the urban fall off in urban vote for Clinton was a big, big deal. And there has been a consciousness of that going back to 2016. Immediately after that election, there was an awareness that there was a problem. A number of groups formed. A lot of grassroots activists have been very engaged. I have to put a big emphasis. Unions, which have been battered in Wisconsin since Scott Walker for a very long time, unions have really put a full court press on in Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha, Beloit, La Crosse, Eau Claire, Green Bay. These are places where there's a lot of good, very modern organizing going on with an awareness that this is Wisconsin. It is a overwhelmingly white state, but in these cities, these are multiracial, multi-ethnic cities that demand a message that is targeted and smart. And I've seen a lot more of that in 2020 than in 2016 by people who are favoring the Democrats, although emphasizing this is sometimes the Democratic Party, but it's often outside and beyond the Democratic Party, grassroots activists and unions.
Very interesting.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, John, is the story we covered here, which is this big, Foxconn deal announced much fanfare with former Governor Scott Walker and Donald Trump. $4 billion in state and local subsidies went into this thing. It's supposed to transform the region into Wisconn Valley, supposed to provide 13,000 jobs. Here we are a couple years down the road, and essentially it was all a fake. It was all phony. They're not manufacturing anything. They've got something like 100 plus workers who were actually, on the books there doing anything. How has that story played out in the state, and how impactful do you think that it is ultimately?
It's a huge story in the state, and it's again, so we talk about what D.C. doesn't always understand about Wisconsin. The simple fact of the matter is Foxconn is understood in Wisconsin as Foxconned, i.e. that the taxpayers of Wisconsin were conned into supporting a corporate welfare scheme that tore up, literally physically tore up southeastern Wisconsin, forced local governments to reorganize, closed down freeways, restructured everything, and for what looks to be nothing. And there's a lot of anger at that. In 2018, Foxconn was a huge issue that helped to power a Democratic sweep of statewide offices. Democrats won U.S. Senate, governor, lieutenant governor, state treasurer, secretary of state, and attorney general, a sweep that was really a rare moment. And part of that was a real shift in southeastern Wisconsin, where you saw a lot of people who were just let down by Foxconn. Amazingly enough, Donald Trump still talks about Foxconn. And he will come to Wisconsin on Saturday, and I wouldn't be surprised at all, just not many miles from where the Foxconn site is, that Trump will bring that up. And it is political madness, because even conservative, in fact, maybe even more conservative Wisconsinites are upset by the fact that they were basically conned. They were told this was this incredible 13,000 jobs, all this
right.
progress, putting Wisconsin at the head of the tech issues, and it's just been a complete letdown. Very typical of how Donald Trump has overpromised and underdelivered for working people.
Yeah, he loves the theater and the show, but then there's absolutely no follow through. John, it's so good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you, John.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Next on Rising, President Trump discussed the possible repeal of Obamacare and newly released footage of his interview with Leslie Stahl. Our friend David Sirott is here to talk about Republicans' plan or lack thereof for health care and protection of pre-existing conditions when Rising returns.